underway, broadcasting to you from our North Catholic studios in Cranberry Township for this episode today where we interview North Catholic alum Joe Rockey. My name is Alex Brown.
And I'm Ryan Berry.
And together we are your hosts for this podcast. And Ryan, it's always a special day when we have an alum in the house. And Joe Rockey, former Chief Risk Officer at PNC and North Catholic alum, class of 1982. And it is our pleasure to sit down to talk to him today. And here's our interview with him. And we are here with former PNC executive and North Catholic alum, class of 1982, Mr. Joe Rockey. Mr. Rockey, thank you for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Rockey, to start off, looking back, what were some of your favorite memories from your time at North Catholic?
So I was thinking about that particular question when I saw it in advance, and I will tell you the defining moment for me at North Catholic was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I actually worked, this was of course at the old building, I worked that summer cleaning the classrooms, and it was, there were only 4 of us there working, and it's where I connected to North. And it sounds odd because you connected with a very few people, but what it taught me, or what it showed me, is how much I fit in. And that probably is true for a lot of freshmen, that you go through the year and you're kind of finding your way. But being there all summer, every day, with just a couple of us, I realized this is really the place for me. And I just had a different outlook as I went into my sophomore year, and I was much more outgoing as I went into my sophomore year. I just felt really at home. And so that's my fondest memory, was goofing around. We did clean the rooms, but goofing around all summer, playing basketball, and every break we found a way to run around the halls and do goofy things. All things you probably can't do actually during the school day.
Yeah. Did you grow up around the north side?
I did grow up on the north side. I grew up on what's called Observatory Hill, and so I used to take a bus to school. At the time, there was an awful lot of kids from the north side who went to North Catholic.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you thought, that's what I want to be one day when I grow up? Did you know your career from an early age, or did you have to discover that as you got older?
So when I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be. And so for all of the high school students that are listening to this thinking, yeah, I have no idea. I knew I wanted to be in business, right? In the 80s was a time that was tough in Western Pennsylvania. A lot of the steel mills were struggling, a lot of manufacturing was struggling, and I knew I wanted to be in business. But I didn't know the path, and I didn't know what that job would be. And I really only figured that out as I moved through life. And if you look at my resume, while I became a CPA working at Ernst & Young, I ultimately ended up at PNC and had 20 different jobs. And so, to this day, I'm still looking for what exactly I want to be. What I enjoy being is a leader, someone who helps the people around them. And so, I found the ability to do that through the education that North gave me, and then after that, Duquesne.
So as you mentioned, you went to Duquesne for college. What factors went into that decision, and what would you say to current students who are going through that same process right now?
So the first thing I would tell any current student is do not stress about it. And I am going to upset many parents with what I'm about to say, but my entire selection process for going to Duquesne consisted of one day I came home from my summer job and was sitting at the kitchen table with my mother, and she asked me, this is August going into my senior year, and she said, well, what college are you going to? And I said, well, I really haven't given it much thought. And my mother said, your sister drives to Duquesne every day. And my sister had a job at Duquesne and was getting her degree at Duquesne. And I was like, okay. And I filled out an application to Duquesne, and I got accepted at Duquesne.
Wow.
And that's the entire thought process. And it's all worked out. And I truly believe today kids spend way too much time stressing about where they're going to go, as opposed to just relaxing and picking something they know they would be comfortable in. My mother's intuition was, you had already gone to 12 years of Catholic school, maybe sending you up to the Spiritans at Duquesne is not a bad idea. And it turned out to be the perfect place for me.
We see a lot of times nowadays where it's so important to have experience in something to get started in any career, through internships or anything like that. And you mentioned you worked at Ernst & Young for 10 years once you got out of Duquesne. Were there any internships that you had leading up to that point?
Yeah, so I worked all through my high school years and my college years. And when I was a junior in college, I got an opportunity to get an internship at Mellon Bank at the time. And that was my entry into professional employment. Up until then, it had been working in the classrooms at North Catholic, bagging groceries at a supermarket, working at a bedding store, things like that. And so it was the first time, I, so to speak, dressed up to go to work, and it was a great experience for me. I will, as folks start through their college years, if you get a chance to get an internship and be in the environment of corporate America, or if you're looking for another aspect, if you're going to be a nurse, be in the environment of a hospital, to get into the environment where you ultimately think you want to be, it really enlightens you as to what life is going to be like after that. Everything from how I needed to dress, which, growing up as a kid on the north side without a whole lot of money, I had no idea how you dress to go to work. I actually had to go talk to one of my uncles about, hey, how should I show up the first day, right? Now, back then it was easy. You just wore a suit. Today it's quite confusing. But having said that, even how you dress, like little things like that, come into play. And it made me much more comfortable the first day I showed up at Ernst & Young when I had graduated.
So as you mentioned, you worked at Ernst & Young after you came out of college. What were some of the roles you had there, and how did that job prepare you for your jobs to come?
So at Ernst, I joined in the audit practice, and I spent 5 years in the audit practice, and then I spent 5 years in the consulting practice. And what Ernst allowed me was, it grounded my financial skills. So as I said, I became a CPA, but it grounded me in understanding the financial statements of a company, various industries that I touched. But what it also did was it allowed me to touch an awful lot of different businesses. So, in any given year, you would go into 20 different companies. Everything from a manufacturing company, which was chemicals, to a hospital setting, to a bank setting. And what it opened my eyes to was I actually enjoyed banking. And so that opened kind of the career path for me. So going into what's now called the Big Four is a great way of deflecting. I don't exactly know what I want to do yet. I don't know what industry I want to be in, because you're going to touch them all when you go in. You're going to touch a bunch of different companies and learn, and it gives you a feel for what environment you fit best into.
With that job as a CPA, are you working with those executives at that company, or just like by doing their finances in some capacity?
So there's two different types of folks that would be at an Ernst & Young even to this day. There are the folks who do taxes, and they could do them for corporate or for individual. I was on what was called the audit side. So I was focused on the business financial statements. And so, in that capacity, you spend a lot of time with the controller of the company, the CFO of the company, okay, a little bit with the CEO, but it's mostly the finance organization that you're spending your time with.
Once you started at PNC, it started to expand and buy out other companies. What was the challenge in having to expand to so many different regions that PNC wasn't in before?
So PNC, I was very fortunate at PNC that we were very much in a growth environment. When I showed up at PNC, we were about $70 billion in terms of total assets, and when I left, we were at about $530 billion. So that's an awful lot of growth over 24 and a half years. In doing that, we acquired several entities, and I got the opportunity to be what I describe as the front guy, which was when we would announce the transaction, I would go to the acquired company, and it was my job to, working with a lot of people from PNC, help the customers and employees move into PNC's environment. And it's just an incredible way of learning all the aspects of the bank, because to move a bank into your bank, you have to really understand all the details of how that bank operates to slide it into the organization that you have. And so to your specific question, when we entered brand new markets, probably the most significant of which was Washington, D.C. when we bought Riggs, it was an opportunity to really test our marketing skills as a company, to enter into a market where nobody knew our name, and to suddenly be there, have our signs up everywhere, and be able to acquire customers, to have them want to come to us to do their financial transactions. And so that was an incredible learning experience for the company that we then, expanded and have gone into many, many new cities. Those skills that we developed from a marketing perspective have benefited us ever since.
That's a Riggs Bank. That's a prominent historic bank there too. Bank of Presidents, right?
It is the Bank of Presidents. One of the things that I got the opportunity to do was see some of the memorabilia. It truly is the Bank of Presidents in that they have signatures of many of the presidents. One of the things that I saw was Abraham Lincoln giving a allowance check to his son. Back then, the allowance was $5. I have to tell you, $5 in 1982 would have been, when I graduated from North, was a big number. I can't imagine $5 in 1861. But there is one of the replicas that we have is a signature of Abraham Lincoln writing a check to one of his sons for $5. So it was really the history of the bank. Riggs actually funded the Alaskan purchase for the United States. The United States borrowed the money from Riggs to be able to buy Alaska.
Wow.
So it's got a great story to it. And that's all now PNC story because we've absorbed it.
That's really cool. And when you buy out banks like that, do you see a lot of turnover, whether it be from the people that work there or the clients?
So from a clientele perspective, if you think about the consumers, consumers really don't jump around between banks very often. If you are using the technology of today, you have your online bill pay, you have your Zelle set up, you have all of these technological tools that you use every day using your phone. And the last thing you want to do is go open up at a new bank and start set all that stuff back up again. And so when on the consumer side, you actually don't see a whole lot of movement. 20 years ago you did, but today you see very little movement of consumers. The business is a little different. Some customers kind of fit the corporate profile and some don't. So you see a little bit more movement on the corporate side. But when PNC, and I'm no longer with PNC, but when PNC goes into a market, it goes into a market to acquire more customers. And so what we tend to do is go in and grow as opposed to shrink, which some acquisitions shrink. PNC has always grown after an acquisition, been able to acquire more customers in the market that we enter.
And so you mentioned entering the new markets. Once you enter those markets, what are some of the marketing strategies that PNC use to try to attract the new clients?
So I would say one of our marketing leaders could probably give a better answer than this, but I will tell you, I think what we bring most to the market is our culture. And our culture starts with taking care of the communities that we're in. PNC has a program called Grow Up Great, which is focused on preparing children for school. And we do it in every single city that we're in. So when we enter a brand new market, the very first thing we bring is Grow Up Great to the market. And we connect to the community and bring the support of what PNC helps fund and the actual work of our employees to help children get ready for school. And it shows that community immediately the heart of who PNC is. And, it shows the culture of giving that PNC brings when it is in a new marketplace. And by the way, it has that everywhere, particularly here in Pittsburgh. It's very engaged, as you know. But we take that everywhere we go.
There's never a clear path to becoming an executive vice president of any corporation or company. How are you able to work your way up to get to that point at PNC through the various roles that you held there?
So, I think the first thing that I learned along the way was don't say no. When someone comes and asks you to do the next assignment, a lot of people will pause and say, what's in it for me? Or why am I doing this? Or, is this really the right step? And what I ultimately concluded along the way of my career was, whoever was asking me had thought a lot longer about why I was the right person to do that job than I could think about why I was the wrong person to do that job. So throughout my career, I said yes when people put opportunities in front of me as opposed to no. That goes all the way back to Ernst & Young. When they'd say, hey, we want you to go do this, I would say, okay. And I would go into every assignment with what can I learn? And I would try to learn in everything that I did, but it started by saying yes. And I do think younger people today have a tougher time saying yes when things are put in front of them. And I would encourage all of you, when someone gives you an opportunity, they probably have spent more time thinking about why you can do this well than you can think about why I shouldn't go do it. And just go do it and do it really well. And then guess what? They come back and ask you to do the next thing and the next thing. And as long as they're directionally going in the right place, you're going to go pretty far.
And as you continued to get into higher roles, I assume that was your case as well, as you were talking to some of your employees as well and trying to find the hidden talents that maybe they didn't see and trying to encourage them to do more stuff like that as well.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of is being able to surround myself with talented people. And, you build your own team when you're in a job, right? So it's your job to make sure you know the people that are working for you and that, you're working together to do what's best for the company to solve a particular task or a particular problem. And it's leveraging all the skills around the table and giving people the opportunity to learn in their job just the way you learned along the way in yours. And being open with them, telling them when things are going well and telling them when there's something they need to work a little bit harder on or they need to study a little bit more to be better at something.
You spoke about one of your passions is leading people, the ability to lead. And as your roles expanded, you oversaw more and more people. What was the responsibility like when you get up to that level in the company? Because you're guiding not only them, but beneath them is all the clients. How does that feel as being a banking executive with that type of responsibility that you have to have?
So you've said that extremely well in that it's about the clients, right? And so when I would go into a conversation, regardless of my job, if I started with our customers, you were able to then explain to the employees at PNC why we were doing what we were doing. And if you took that client-centric approach to how we were trying to get something accomplished and you had an open mind. So one of the things I was very clear to is I didn't have all the answers, right? I always felt the answers were in the room. So if there were 10 people in a room and we had the right 10 people, we would get to the right answer. It just didn't have to be my answer, right? And so if we worked together and we were open to hearing what everybody had to say, we would get to the right answer. And if we always kept the customer's need at the top of the agenda, we would make sure we would deliver the right thing for our customers.
As technology has expanded, the banks have had to adapt to that as well, and mobile banking has developed. Do you feel like that's a good thing for the banks? Do you think it makes it a lot more challenging?
Well, I think mobile banking, starting with the customers, makes life a lot more convenient, right? So, I can get up at 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning and do all my banking. I don't have to wait till a branch opens. I don't have to wait till I can call somebody. And so it makes banking easier for our customers. It puts different challenges into the bank itself because you have to have, cybersecurity protection. You have to have data information protection and things of that nature. So it puts new challenges that a bank has to deal with today that it didn't have to deal with 20 years ago. But that said, good banks are capable of managing that because it's for the benefit of the convenience of our customers.
You've been around the banking industry now for over 30 years now, and
yeah, I'm old.
But you've seen a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges over that course of time. But what was the biggest challenge, and where would the recession of the late 2000s and what all happened with Bernie Madoff and all that fall into that?
Yeah, so without a doubt, the biggest challenge for the financial services industry was the Great Recession, right? And I'm sure if I lived in the 50s, I would have said it was the Depression, right? And so the Great Recession reset the bar for a lot of financial institutions. It also reset the bar for regulatory oversight. Dodd-Frank came out of the Great Recession, and it reset the regulatory standards of what banks needed to do. And, good banks reacted to those standards and put in place controls and activities that supported satisfying those regulations. And those regulations were designed to protect the customers, to make sure that the bank was going to be solid and was going to be stable when, difficult economic times showed themselves. And so I wouldn't necessarily say I agree with every regulation, but the broad set of regulations were designed to protect our customers. And so, that was a challenge, though, because it was such a sudden set of events, and it was followed by such a strong reaction from the government and the regulators as to standards that needed to be put in place. So it put the banks under, not only did they have to work through the customer implications of the Great Recession, they also had to work through the regulatory changes that put us in the place we are today, which is in a much more stable banking environment.
What is your perspective on the recent Silicon Valley bank collapse, and from a risk management perspective, what could they have done differently to try to prevent that?
So I'll start off by saying the Wall Street Journal said that the job I had at PNC was chief risk officer, and Silicon Valley Bank went for over a year without the chief risk officer. And so, by the way, they also said that it is the most thankless job in all of banking to be the chief risk officer. So,
would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably why I'm retired at 59 years old. Yeah. But so, having said that, to run your institution without somebody whose sole responsibility is to make sure you're managing the risk for such an extended period of time, for all intents and purposes, is unacceptable. And all the details of why Silicon Valley Bank went out of business will be written about for the next 5 years. But the number one reason is they were not focused on risk the way they needed to be. And to say that you didn't have a senior executive whose sole job was to focus on risk is really a shortcoming from the bank, its board, and arguably the regulators as well, to allow that to be the situation in place.
And that's, you talked about it has to be client first when in the banking industry. It has to be put the client first. Has there ever been a time when it was a challenge as an executive to be able to do that in terms of business, maybe trying to put balance business versus clients?
To be honest, I would say no, because I think at the end of the day, doing the right thing by our customers is always the standard that we should live to. Mm-hmm. And so now there are some things that you say, I can't do that for your customer. But by the way, saying no is as important as saying yes. Don't stretch outside of what you're capable of doing because somebody wants you to do it. That's a good mantra for life in general, but it's a great mantra for how a bank should operate. If you're capable of doing it, then do it. If it's not part of what you want to offer your customers, then simply say no. But doing the right thing by your customer will always lead you to the best outcome. You may not have the best financial quarter, but that's okay, because you're in the game for the long haul. And that means you need your customers with you for the long haul, even if it means you didn't make as much money in this particular quarter.
Did you have a role model as you're growing up and expanding your career that you kind of looked up to and said, I want to do that job, or I want to follow that path?
I always looked to leadership as the guide that I was going for. So without naming a whole lot of names, there were many people throughout my career who I looked at and said, he's really a great leader, or she really is handling difficult situations in a good way. And what I observed was you become a little bit like the people who are around you. So if you surround yourself and put yourself in positions where there's good leaders around you that you're learning from, you don't become exactly like any one of them. You steal the best pieces of many of them to become the best person you can be as a leader. And so, as I look back to my time in Ernst & Young, there were several key partners who taught me a great deal about how to lead and how to work and what it meant to be successful. Same thing was true at PNC, teaching me, whether it was Jim Rohr as the CEO or Bill Demchak as CEO or others I worked around, they taught me different things, or I saw different things in them that I said, that's a behavior I want to replicate in my career.
Outside of work, you've done great work for nonprofit organizations over the years, serving on the Ronald McDonald House Board and many other prominent roles for years now. Why has that been such an important part of your life?
So I have always felt that, giving back. So, North Catholic is grounded on the concept of the Maronist giving back in education. And the Sisters of St. Joseph at Nativity, the Spiritans at Duquesne, and the Maronists at North Catholic, and my own family and my own parents taught me that, God has given you gifts, and it is your job to use those gifts for the people around you. And so whether it is, my role with the Little Sisters of the Poor, or what I've done with St. Joseph's House of Hospitality, or Catholic Charities, or, as you said, the Ronald McDonald House and others. I'm actually on Duquesne's board as well. It's a matter of bringing what I'm capable of, my talents, to help others deliver for the benefit of whether it's the homeless, whether it's the elderly at the Little Sisters, whether it's a family with a child who's sick, which is what, Ronald McDonald House is there to support. All of those are ways of giving back to the community and helping those in the community who have a tough day have a little bit less of a tougher day.
Being from Catholic education, how has your faith played a role in a lot of the decisions you made throughout your life and your career as well?
So, my name is Joseph, and I pray to St. Joseph every day. May 1st, I know St. Joseph's feast day is March 19th, but May 1st is equally as important to me, which is the feast of St. Joseph the Worker. And, I have prayed to St. Joseph that I have the strength to do the work that is in front of me, to respond to the asks that are being made of me, both in my business career, my family life, and, my non-professional support the community life, that, I will have the strength to do what's necessary to make the right decision and to do it in the way that God would want it to be done. And so, that's part of my life every day, and hopefully it's part of every North Catholic student's life. There are many others doing a lot more than me. I actually had lunch on Friday with a North Catholic grad who graduated with me. I won't offer her name here. She can offer it herself. But she works with the homeless and actually provides health care to the homeless on a regular basis and is out walking the streets and going into homeless camps. And, I walked away from that lunch thinking, I feel good about myself, by the way. I feel like I've done good things and, I've tried to do good. And then I hear a story like that and I think, boy, I'm a slouch. I don't do anything, right? Compared to going into a homeless community and providing health care for someone who, but for Janice showing up, it wouldn't happen. And so I think all of you at North Catholic are learning some great skills and, using those as you go through the rest of your life for the good of others, and keeping God in the forefront of your path is the way to go.
Without a doubt. And you've worked with so many successful individuals over the course of your career. What are some qualities that you see in many of them?
So the number one quality in being a successful leader is to listen, right? So you can be a good leader for about 6 months screaming at people or just assuming you have all the answers. But you will be a long-term good leader if you listen to others and you learn from what they're telling you. By the way, again, they won't always be right. You won't always be right. But you won't be a good leader or successful if you assume you are the only one with the right answer. So being able to listen to others and what their ideas are, what their thoughts are, why they have the position they have is actually the best way to lead others, because then you can understand where they're coming from, meet them along the way to achieve a common objective you're both trying to get to.
Looking back, were you ever given any phrase or word of advice that's really stuck with you? And do you have any words of advice for any North Catholic students now?
So I will give you two. One I've already said. Don't say no. Like the number one advice is somebody asks you to do something, go do it. Whether it's your grandmother asking you to go, take the garbage out or pull the weeds in the yard, just say yes and go do it. And that will carry you very far. And then the second thing is realize that life is hard work. And so, whatever you want to achieve, you're going to have to work to get there. And so whether it's a sports challenge, whether it's a business challenge, life is hard work, and don't be afraid of hard work. So again, I'll point back to St. Joseph, the worker, right? It's about work, right? And so, there's a reason they call it work. And, it isn't all fun and games, and don't be afraid to work hard.
After all the success you've achieved professionally in your life so far, now retired from PNC, what's next for you?
So I retired, but I didn't decide to quit working. I'm actually running for county executive in Allegheny County. I know North Catholic doesn't sit in Allegheny County, but many of the people listening here do. So please vote for me. But I believe that we're in a very interesting time in our country. We're in a very interesting time in Allegheny County. For all of you at North Catholic, sadly we are losing jobs in Allegheny County, and we need to change that that direction. All of you that are graduating from school this year or in the next couple of years, you want to come out to a nice, vibrant economy, and that's what I feel we need to really focus on. And as county executive, my focus will be on building and growing our economy to get us to the place where our children, in this case, the two of you, who aren't my children, but but that you have a future, that you can say, look, my future is in Allegheny County. I don't have to go to Tampa or to Charlotte or to Atlanta to get a good job. And so that's my focus. But yes, I'm running for county executive.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming in today. And we wish you all the best of luck in that and what's to come for you in your life. And we really appreciate your time today.
Well, I appreciate both of you asking the questions. You've done a great job. You're very well prepared. And, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.